All right, we are here. Hilary Weinstein, welcome back to Seeing Other People.
Thank you so much for having me again. I love being on this podcast because I feel like I'm just talking to you.
That is the goal. I don't really know how to start this conversation. So why don't we just start by saying, how are you doing? How is your day today?
Yeah, it's a doozy. So I opened my laptop to click the link that you sent to me. 1 minute after rushing back into my house from traffic, getting back from my wedding planner, which sounds like something really exciting. And it was exciting. It was helpful. It was exciting. But if my mom recently passed, as you ought to know, and if she was alive, she would have been my wedding planner. So my day has been a double-edged sword, and I think that would be the best way to describe the last 4 months. I feel like I'm like coming out of hiding on this episode in some way, because like I haven't seen patients in I think 3 or 4 months. Like I haven't. You're the first professional person I'm talking to outside of the therapist on my team.
Well, I am really grateful to have you here, and I can only imagine this is going to be just hard to talk about, and something that is probably uncomfortable and scary, but
that's why we do it.
I'm proud of you. And yeah, the hard conversations are the most important ones to have. So let's back up. 2 things at play here. 1, you recently got engaged.
I did.
And 2, your mom passed away.
She did. High highs and low lows. So context to that. My mom was diagnosed in 2018 September. I remember it was because I opened my office in New York, like pre-COVID, in September 2018 of my practice. And I don't think I had even seen a patient yet. I think I was like finishing decorating it. And I just sat on my Wayfair couch, and my dad called, or rather, my brother and I were harassing them because they're like, oh, right there. I'm still using present tense, and I'm probably going to throughout the episode. I'm not at past tense point, but very hovering, not in a bad way, but just would never not answer the phone for their kids. Like would always assume an emergency and always answer, kind of thing. So each of us had reasons to reach out to them that day, and I think after a period of like 2 hours, I forget who texted who, but one of us texted the other one. We're like, have you heard from mom and dad? Have you heard from mom and dad? No. And we're like, what the hell? And like my brother called me. My brother's not someone this is my older brother. He's not someone who speaks on the phone, loves text, like just hi, period. And like, that's him being happy. So he calls me. And so I know he's worried. And he's like, what's going on? They never don't answer us. And finally, they called, but it turns out they had been at the hospital and were trying to figure out how to tell their kids, me and my 2 brothers, that my mom was diagnosed with ovarian cancer, and it was pretty bad. And I remember like collapsing on the floor and just sitting there and crying for the rest of the day. Actually, you know what? I did have patients because I had to cancel the patients. And fast forward, she had a reoccurrence annually. So 4 reoccurrences in 4 years, 3 major surgeries, lots of like ICU and like month-long stays. But she was a fighter, and she is the most impressive woman I know. I know a lot of people say that about their moms, but God damn it, did she fight. And I realized recently, actually, have you seen Dead to Me?
I started it.
Okay.
I didn't finish it.
I love the show because I love Christina Applegate and like I love the kind of like the dark, witty humor. But trigger warning for anyone: there's cancer involvement, and in the most recent season. And so when I realized that as I was watching, I was like, oh shit, I should turn this off. And then I was like, you know what? No, power through, feel your emotions, get your cry out, whatever. And I realized there's a scene where she's Googling her survival rate chances. I'd never done that with my mom. And
Oh
like,
my
who
God.
doesn't do that? Isn't that like the first thing you would do? So it just, and I asked, as I realized that, I texted my brothers and I said, did you ever do this? And they said, no. And I was both parts angry at myself because if I had, I would have known how little time I really had with her, and compassionate and understanding that, like, okay, well, my two siblings didn't either. We clearly, like, that was some kind of denial. Like, we didn't want to know. But yeah, so it definitely, I think it was October 31st, she was hospitalized for a side effect of a clinical trial medication she was on for the most recent diagnosis, or reoccurrence rather, and was in the hospital for 24 days. I flew up from Austin, where I live, and my dad slept in a recliner chair of the hospital for 24 days. Man did not shower. Bless his soul, and bless my mom's soul for smelling that. And my now, not at the time, my now fiance and I stayed in their apartment for those 24 days and watched their dog. And I went in and visited every day. So yeah, and then she passed on December 7th, and it was brutal. But at the same time, my fiance, seems Scott, I'm pretty sure last time we recorded, I was referencing Scott by name.
Yeah.
And which I only am mentioning because he proposed after 9 months of dating. So I was trying to do the math of when we last did an episode.
Yeah. You had things were starting to go really, really well.
Yeah, I'm fairly certain I was on the couch in the living room here. So I had moved in at the time. But anyway, he was planning to propose when he visited my family in New York on Christmas. He's originally from Dallas. And then it became abundantly clear my mom wasn't going to make it till Christmas. So he improvised and got down on one knee without a ring because he wasn't planning to propose for another month. In his PJs when we were on our couch, and had a whole speech. I obviously said yes. I was also relieved because apparently his original plan was to go to Rockefeller Center and ice skate. No shade to anyone who's been proposed like this. Pretend to fall and be down on one knee, and that is the antithesis of
what you would want.
And have a photographer. Like, I would have found a corner and just crawled into it. But this was much more me and us, and he just knew how much, like, if my mom clearly wasn't going to be around for our wedding, that how much I would want / need her to be included in an aspect of it, and just know that, like, I was good and my future would be good. So then we went ring shopping and we flew to New York and shared that with my mom while she was still fighting and cognizant enough to really, really appreciate it. And even, like, I guess this brings me into how I originally was talking to you about this subject when this happened, or when I was thinking about this. What everything comes down to these days, social media. And who doesn't love announcing their engagement on social media, or wedding, or pregnancy, right? And I felt this immense dread. And it was so special intimately to share with my mom. Also, you can see here, I had just gotten tattoos. This one says LYF for Love You Forever, a children's book, and how we signed all of our texts. And this one says My Sweet Pie. I've never had a tattoo before. These are my first two tattoos, and they're in her handwriting. She wrote it in the hospital.
That's beautiful.
And so I have a picture, which I believe is on my personal Instagram, of like her like holding my hand, so you can see like the ring and my tattoo in her hands. But I just thought, like, I'm 33, and there were so many years when people would post engagement announcements and such, and I was at various points in my dating life, whether it was going through a breakup, being in a toxic relationship, starting a new relationship or situationship, and just feeling such immense jealousy and feeling like I was not on the timeline I should be. And part of me didn't want to say anything about it because I was like, I don't want anyone to feel how I felt, especially because they have no effing, I don't know if I can curse on here, idea, okay, what's going on behind the scenes. Like, and probably 2 hours later, after the ring was on my finger in front of my mom, I like removed myself and sat in an empty bathtub and like screamed into a pillow and cried. But like, was that on Instagram? No. So yeah, double-edged sword.
It's how long after you got engaged did she pass?
So we got engaged. Well, if we're saying unofficially via the ring, I don't know. Actually, I don't know that date. Maybe like probably November like 10th or something like that, give or take.
It's like a month.
And then the ring, I remember because we had it delivered to my parents' apartment because they have that's where we wanted to be and have them there for it. And the the tracking date was November 18th via UPS. And Scott and I were staying at a hotel, and just knowing like visiting my mom in the hospital and knowing that or actually she was discharged, I think the day before that. And so just to like kind of home hospice. And so we went to my parents' apartment. We were walking like the 6 or so blocks from the hotel we were at to my parents' apartment. And we were like happy because like we're about to like have the official ring, but also like it was so hard to watch my mom in that state and in pain. So like it was just so much, and we were acknowledging that. And we were kind of dry humor joking about like how incredibly untraditional this has been. So we're like, so he said, like, what should I do? Should I, like, when we get the ring, should I like get down on one knee again, like in front of your mom? And I was like, I don't know. And I was like, that might be too emotional for her. Like, I'm not sure. I was like, you know what? Let's just like go totally rogue. Turned out that our favorite doorman, shout out Jonathan, was there. And we're like, let's just act like nothing's happening. And so I was like, hey, Jonathan, like, I think I have a package. And he's like, oh, yeah, Hilary, here you go. Just UPS package. And we just opened it. And then, like, there was, like, this elderly woman next to us, like, talking Jonathan's ear off about her prescriptions.
Classic.
Yeah. And I was like, we're like this this is interesting. And so he just opened the box and then he put it on my finger. And then Jonathan, our doorman, was the first person to see the ring.
Oh my God. That
And
is
Jonathan
so
was like,
funny.
what? Like, and then we took the
He's like, did
elevator.
this just happen?
Yeah, and he's like, what are you like? You like me that much? Like, so it was just like funny and like a like icing on the cake of how much of a non-traditional journey this has been. And then went up and saw my parents. And that was November 18th, as per
When you were
tracking.
going through it the last few months in the fall, how did you like show up to work and get through it every day?
I didn't. Honestly, I was fortunate enough to have taken the risk in 2018 when my mom was first diagnosed to do the whole self-employment thing. And then when there was more demand than I ever anticipated, started hiring therapists who, of course, I have a financial benefit from. And they are wonderful, not just clinicians, but friends and supporters. And I just said, hey, I can't, I don't, like, I can't do anything. Like, I don't even know if I can get out of bed, like, any given day. Like, I definitely can't work. So, like, you guys just got to run this show. So I didn't. I texted my clients and I basically said, that was difficult. That was really difficult. I don't want to overlook that because I didn't want to trigger anyone if like, no, because I knew their family histories. Like I've known these people for years and I didn't want to trigger anyone. And the staple of therapy is it's about the patient, not about the therapist. So like it's unethical, typically speaking, to ever put a patient in the position where they feel bad for the therapist and then therefore are maybe like tailoring things they say or not
Walking
saying
on
certain things.
eggshells. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, but I felt like knowing that I was about to take months off, I didn't want anyone thinking I was just piecing out.
Yeah. Like abandoning them.
Right. So even saying like I had a family emergency sounded like very like cold and clinical and not personal. Like that's not how I talk.
Yeah. It's like also like, did you have a family emergency or are you just using that as an excuse? Because it's like a thing where people don't ask questions and just say, hope everything's okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So luckily my patients were all very understanding and there were certain ones who, for reasons that benefited them, I had shared a little bit so that it wasn't out of the blue. But yeah, I didn't, to answer the question, I didn't, in the workspace, I really just like signed off. Like I wasn't even like posting stories or anything because I just like was having this whole existential crisis of like, what even like story or like quote or whatever, like who gives a fuck? Like who cares about anything? I sure don't right now. Like I just care about keeping my family afloat. So, and then I went into complete autopilot of like fight, aka doing everything I could for the first round of memorial services, which was I think December or like 16th or so, and a little bit before then. And then her like more religious memorial service is coming up in a little over a week. So after we stopped recording, so I went from wedding planner, podcast, and then I have to write her eulogy.
Jesus.
All of that is to say that I just wanted so badly to like teleport in time and tell my younger self with every engagement post and every announcement, you have no idea what's happening. And I would see it play out there were certain circumstances where a couple individuals didn't understand, had no experience, and I'm happy for them that they haven't, with grieving the loss of a parent or child or spouse or whatever, and really pushed boundaries on like things they wanted in a certain amount of time, and it was really eye-opening. But yeah.
I had a guest on the podcast recently, Jamie Stone. She lost both her dad and her sister over the course of a few years. And
Oh God.
she had a lot of interesting things to say about how there are people in your life that you expect would show up for you that really don't.
Mm-hmm.
And that through her grieving process and through navigating that with her friends, she actually lost some of her closest friends because they didn't know, or they didn't, they just didn't show up in the right way, or didn't show up at all.
Yeah. I mean, I need to listen to that episode. It's terrible, but it's not surprising. I'm fortunate enough and I don't know her age or the specific circumstances, but I think there's something to be said that also, because I'm an introvert, my closest, like it's quality over quantity right now. Like I'm 33, like I'm not dabbling in like post-college social life. Like, so I'm fortunate that I had a lot of support and wasn't really disappointed by anyone. But that's not to say there weren't a couple of people who definitely surprised me. But I'm lucky that they weren't like my best friends. But
yeah,
they were still a figure in my life that I valued and now have a hard time viewing the same way.
Yeah. It's like there's so many tough things. It's like there's the one thing that happened, and then there's all the follow-up, like all of the dominoes that fall surrounding it.
Yeah.
And even to deal with like 10% of what you've dealt with is just I mean, I know you're making it through one day at a time, but I don't know how, and I'm sure you also don't know how. I want to, yeah.
It surprises me every minute by minute.
Yeah. With the social media stuff, I want to get into that. I know that's the core of what we wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
But there was a lot to discuss. I completely relate to obviously seeing people getting engaged, seeing people getting married, even just seeing people like debuting their significant other and like posting like, hey, I have this person. It's like, what would be a better world? Like what would even be the perfect world of this happening? Because it's not like people are gonna post like, here's us getting together. Okay, we just had our first fight, you guys. Like, we're both not talking and really anxious and like not sure if we're gonna make it through. Like, but how can we, or like what would we even want to see to not feel so terrible and see these things and consider it like an attack on ourselves, or that like we're not good enough, because I don't think there's a single person that hasn't seen something, whether it's about a relationship or a promotion or moving to a new place or some type of accolade or milestone, where yes, we can be so happy for someone else, but I think it almost always makes us reflect and look at ourselves and say like, well, I'm less than because I don't have that, or I want that and I haven't figured it out, so something's wrong with me.
Yeah. Did you watch Friends?
Yes.
Okay. I know not everyone does, but I would imagine a vast portion of your audience has.
I actually didn't until last year.
Oh my
and
gosh.
I watched it all the way through for the first time ever. And I loved it. It was. And I had tried multiple times before and I couldn't get into it. And thank God that it clicked this time.
Yeah. Well, I was just what you just said reminded me of, and I'll keep this very brief, but just there's this one episode where, for anyone who is listening and has watched Friends, where Phoebe and Joey get into a fight about the concept of can an act truly be selfless? Like, can you do something kind for someone? Like, I don't know, giving the example here was like giving a sandwich or $5 to a homeless man, and it truly be selfless in nature. And Phoebe's argument was that it can't, because you feel good about yourself because you just did something nice. And I feel like that's similar, of like, you can be happy for someone, but it's in no world mutually exclusive that you don't also look inward and compare yourself. And that's like the nature and a lot of the toxicity of social media, is that those two things are co-occurring. And no, we can't stop social media, so we have to learn how to adapt. And what does that look like? I mean, my knee jerk, as I was hearing you talk about it, is more transparency about the hard stuff. So, like, we can all go out and find people who talk about the hard stuff. First podcast coming to mind is Glennon Doyle's We Can Do Hard Things. She's really open and raw and vulnerable. Like, you can go out and find that, but it would be really nice if just a day-to-day practice of like the people on your feed were more open about that.
Yeah. And I feel like that's something that I, especially recently, I've tried to be more cognizant of. And even today, I posted a video being like, I'm so fucking tired. I was up until 1 working. I'm not proud of that. I have 3 recordings today and an event. And I know these sound like awesome things, and I'm excited about them, and I'm grateful that I have them. But I'm so overwhelmed and anxious and exhausted. And it's weird because it's like, again, is it selfless that I'm posting? Like, I'm posting that partially because I want to show that, like, it is not like all positive. It is not all glamorous, like, by any means. But it's like, well, I don't want people to suddenly feel bad for me either.
Yeah.
And I don't want people to think I'm just like complaining. So it's like, it's hard to balance. And I agree with your point of like, you can go out and find it. Like, you can follow certain people, but realistically, it's the majority of the people you know are not going to be doing that.
Right. And that's, I mean, in the professional space, like you just explained, and I'm assuming you're referencing, because I haven't looked at my social media today, but I'm assuming you're referencing your podcast Instagram when you say, yeah. In the professional space, that's a really tightrope. That's tough. But personal too. Like, I have a personal account and I have a professional account, on amongst multiple platforms. But like, even if I were to say, which I like pretty much, I mean, not pretty much, I fully did in my personal engagement picture, which I did end up posting, the caption maybe mentioned Scott once and was in large part a tribute to my mom and the woman she raised me to be, so that I understood how to be loved and how to love. But still, even that, I could see a younger me still being like a little insensitive and being like, okay, but you're engaged, and like only hearing, like selective hearing. And whereas, like, unless I had a reality show, I wouldn't be able to show. I mean, I could do a better job at like posting, being really vulnerable and posting videos and pictures, which I think I'd like to. At like, this conversation is motivating me even more to give a better idea of like No, this was 3 hours later. And like timestamps. Like 3 hours later, I have a picture. I'm gonna post it. Once you release this episode, I'm gonna post it. It's a picture of, I sent it to a couple of friends, of me in the bathtub, fully clothed, crying with a glass of wine. While I just tried to hold it together and I excused myself from like planning a part of the memorial service with my dad and aunts. And I didn't post that, but like, but it shouldn't be, of course. I probably should have, like, I guess to answer your question, that's the world that nobody wants to do it. It's scary, it's vulnerable, it's terrifying, but like the alternative is we're getting half the story and then judging ourselves based off of half, if not less, of someone else's story.
Let me ask you something.
Yeah.
If you had posted that, what would have happened?
In the professional space, I would have feared people would feel bad for me. And I was especially in the position of a therapist where I'm supposed to be a blank slate, for lack of better phrase, and like completely console and focus on my patients and even the followers who aren't patients, on their feelings and lifting them up or supporting them. I would have felt self-centered, and fearing that people would feel bad for me. Which, saying that out loud now, why is that bad? Why is it so terrible if someone feels bad for me? Like, just as a human, forget therapist, but like even if it was on my therapy page, I'm a human, and I mean, like, just the first time I posted on social media since my mom passed, it's like a couple days ago, just announcing the new therapist in my practice. And that's an accolade. That's something that like people look at the story and they're like, oh, great. Some people might be like, oh, I want to work with that person. But to the outside or my friends, the first response is, congratulations, you're expanding your business. Like that's like, it's not a humble brag, because the point for my business is to advertise the new therapists that are available, but it can come off like that. So if I'm posting something that people can feel like, oh well, that's like you said before, a career advancement, that maybe I'm struggling with career and that makes me feel bad, I'm reflecting on myself. Right. Why shouldn't I be able to post something equally as human, which is I'm suffering, and kind of level the playing field and create a balance so that it's not a highlight reel?
Right. And one thing that came to my mind when I was thinking of what would happen if I posted something like that in a different situation, of course, was a lot of people would reach out. And of course, that is a wonderful thing and appreciated. But for me, I would get really overwhelmed and stressed and anxious really quickly, because I would then feel like I owe every single one of these people a response. But then if I gave a response that was cold and not like warm enough, like, are they going to take it personally? And then what if they try and continue the conversation? I don't want to ignore them. Like, I have so much DM anxiety on a daily basis. I don't know why, but DMs, like, I just feel like if somebody sends me a DM, like I owe them a response. And I don't really feel that way about texts. But then when I don't respond for whatever reason, I feel really guilty. And so if I ever post something personal or something I'm struggling with, and people, or even something positive, and people reach out, it instantly overwhelms me.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that makes
sense. So is it selfish to not post it then? because I'm afraid of the response. Like, what do I do?
So that's a really interesting way of broaching the topic, because I think there's a very big distinction between selfish and boundaries, and you can't control how other people are going to react like that. That's something that we all kind of have to accept, and it's difficult to accept. That's why you would feel overwhelmed in that case, and as would I. But like, that's the struggle. But that doesn't mean that shouldn't dictate your behaviors, the how other people are going to perceive it, your how you act because you feel it would benefit some people or what have you. It's a shame to not do that because of a fear that certain people might receive it in a way that they're offended. But it's like, well, that's their life and experience, and what does that say about them? If they're offended, that, let's put it in my perspective. Do you know how many freaking texts I had? Like, I had to turn off my phone when my mom passed, and that was one of my main thoughts. And I had to sit there and be like, no, my mom's not here anymore. That's what I should be sitting here thinking about, not the punctuation in the text I sent to, or emoji use or lack thereof that I used in response to people. Yes, I'm acknowledging that, or maybe not, or like, that's the part that's on other people that we don't have power over and have to release. That whether we choose to respond or not, or choose to respond right away in a colder way or later in a warmer way, that's them as their own individual and their life experiences processing, or having a difficulty processing what you're going through, and that maybe you're not going to respond in a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
Which actually, I think I saw you pause it, but when I had a call come in while we were recording, it was an old friend of mine who I haven't spoken to over the phone. She sent her condolences via text. I don't know if I answered it or not, honestly, but weird timing that I saw it pop up on my computer, that it was an old friend calling. And sorry if you listen to this, you're going to know who you are, but even if I wasn't recording with you right now, I wouldn't have answered, because I just came back from a wedding planner and I'm about to write my mom's eulogy, and I just freaking can't.
Yeah.
And it's not about them. And I think there's just a level of that we just need to release. That's not in our control. Yeah. And it doesn't make us selfish or mean.
I think we're all really bad at it, at least.
Yeah.
I mean, I can only speak for myself, but I think it's a really difficult thing to do, to put ourselves first when we need to protect ourselves and protect our energy and take care of ourselves, and not feel guilty about it. Because it's not about your friend who called. It's not about not wanting to talk to her. It's about, there are other things on your mind right now, and there's only so much mental capacity. There's only so much emotions you can process at once. And maybe some conversations, just, there's a time and place. And right now, today is not the time.
Right.
But that doesn't mean she did something wrong by calling. Of course, it's like wonderful and appreciated.
I know.
It's tough.
I know. And it's like, speaking to like mental capacity, emotional capacity, I think social capacity is something like people don't talk about enough. Like that, if I had taken that phone call, especially because this is someone I haven't talked to over the phone in a while, maybe 30 minutes, 40 minutes out of my day socially, of like rehashing things or just sharing emotions or what have you, and I have a social obligation tonight. I mean, obligation is a terrible word to use. I am doing my first wedding dress shopping. So, and I have amazing friends of mine joining me in that. And
What a fucking day you're having.
yeah, it's more their obligation. I mean, it's not. I told them no pressure, but because it's like a weeknight, but it's social energy rather that I'm expending that everyone needs to on a day-to-day basis balance. Like, because I have that, I'm way less likely, given what's going on for me right now, to take a phone call in the middle of the day. If I didn't have anything planned tonight, maybe I would have. I don't know.
Right. Yeah.
But it's not about that person.
Yeah.
And it's not about us being selfish or mean.
Yeah. Yeah. Even, even this morning when I was feeling overwhelmed and all that, a friend of mine wanted to call me to tell me about a date she went on last night. And I was just like, I can't, I just can't right now. And she tried to tell me about it yesterday night, but I was, again, like working till 1 a.m. So I didn't like really answer her. I was just like, oh my God, tell me everything tomorrow. And then this morning she was texting me and she called me and I didn't pick up. But then I was posting on Instagram for work. And I'm like thinking, oh my God, she's going to see this and think I'm ignoring her. And I feel bad. And then like she called me again and I didn't answer. I was in the shower, but then I texted her. I'm like, sorry, I was in the shower. Like, can I call you back later? And she was like, I have a call. She called me at 12:50 and she said, I have a call at 1 to 1:30, but I can after. And I was like, oh, good. She only has 10 minutes. Okay, I will do this call now because I know that it's only going to take up 10 minutes of my brain and I can handle 10 minutes, but probably not 11. And I felt really shitty for doing that.
But that's so not shitty. Like, that is just how we all need to unlearn the existence and pressure of social media. On my ride home, my drive home from the wedding planner, I feel like I had 3 days today, from the wedding planner to get to my computer on time to be speaking with you, I was thinking, because I had a similar experience where when I hadn't posted anything because I just didn't have the capacity or didn't want to or couldn't think of anything that I cared enough about to post. But now returning to work and first post being about the new therapist on my team, I wondered, well, are the patients who I'm going to start seeing again next week, which is when I'm scheduled to start seeing patients, going to think, well, why couldn't you talk to me this week? You're posting on social media, right? But it's like, maybe I only had the energy for just that. And
or who knows, maybe it wasn't even you posting. It was in this case, but that's the other thing.
Okay. Love that you kind of read my mind there, because the thought that occurred to me while I was driving back, and this is toxic, this is terrible, that my thought was, A, I should hire someone to do my social media. But most importantly, B, I need to make an announcement that I'm hiring someone to do that. My social media is not always me. That's the most like classic female, like, I'm sorry for asking what you're about to ask thing in the world. And I was like, no, I shouldn't. I should not do that. But like, also I should, because I don't want anyone being like, well, you just posted 5 stories and like that must have taken a while on Canva or whatever, but you couldn't pick up my call. It's like, well, that wasn't me.
Even if it was.
Like, why do I need a cop out?
Yeah. Well, and that's another thing when we get into, people we follow on social media and some of the bigger, maybe like influencers or people in the therapy space, in any space that we're in and that we exist in the online forums, like forums. Why did I just say online forums? But you know what I mean. In the online forums. We don't know if it's them or if it's someone else. And so that person could be literally on the floor of their bathroom hysterically crying and not okay. And someone else who works for them is posting videos that they made at like a fashion show or an influencer event or doing their makeup, getting ready with me, whatever, from another day.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Sometimes I'll post videos even that I did not record that day, sometimes not even that week. And it'll be when I had to cancel plans because I said I was sick. And I was sick and I am sick, but I still have to post content. And I feel so much like shame and guilt around that. But it's like, you guys don't want to see a video of me blowing my nose and the garbage pail full of tissues that I keep throwing out every day to refill up. Like, no one wants to see that.
Or do they? You know, like maybe that would make someone having a hard day feel better.
Maybe.
But
that I'm having a worse day than them.
But then it goes back to, well, then I'm making it about me and I don't want people to feel bad for me. It's this catch-22. Right.
Yeah. One question I want to ask you, a little bit off topic. So you and Scott were together for 9 months when you got engaged. Obviously, that was a really difficult 9-month period. I imagine there are people listening who have loved ones who are really sick or who are going through something really devastating. And one of the biggest questions that I get asked in those cases is like, well, do I date right now? If I met someone, how would I even tell them? How would they adapt to this world? Would it make me undesirable because I'm going through this? Do I have the mental capacity for this? So I'd love to, spend our last few minutes talking a little bit about what that journey was like for you.
Actually, a really very good question and a lot more poignant than you probably intended, because the answer is that we met at a bar, so we met in real life, but I was originally I had left Austin to go to New York for a family member's wedding. And then I stayed because my mom had, I forget if it was a diagnosis or complication or something. It was something related to her health, and I stayed. And so when I returned, I was supposed to return right after Christmas. No, I was supposed to return November. The wedding was in October. And then I didn't. And then I stayed through Christmas, and I just needed to be with my family, and I didn't return until February. And a friend of mine had planned a dinner, like a welcome back dinner, and then I postponed again and came back later in February, mid-February. And when I came back, she was like, we need to go out. Like, you need to get out of your house. We need to go out. And that's the night that we met. But that was coming off of a period of a really difficult time. And then we were good and smooth sailing. Like my family was good. My mom's cancer was under control, X, Y, and Z, until it wasn't. I don't think there's a right time. I don't think you should postpone living your life for anything. I don't know what part of this is clinical or personal, but I hear so many people saying, once I feel better about myself, what I hate the most, especially because I focus on body image and eating disorders, once I lose the weight. And, or what have you. How much of that is self-sabotage, like postponing your own joy with some arbitrary rule or obstacle in place? And it doesn't have to be arbitrary. It could be very real. Like, I postponed because of very real circumstances coming back to Austin that time before I met Scott. But I begrudgingly allowed myself to go out with my friends, and I met Scott, and my entire life is different now. So I would encourage anyone to just keep taking the next step forward in the dating sphere and every sphere.
Yeah. And I imagine having him through this time has been like the most incredible thing.
Well, that's why I feel like all the more reason why I feel so passionately about that statement is that, like, had I not, which would have been way more characteristic of me than what I did end up doing, I have no idea where I would be mentally, emotionally, what have you, going through this without him and without the ad that he brings to my life. I have no idea.
Shout out to
So,
your friend who dragged you out.
Lainey, love you. Shout out.
Lainey, MVP.
Everyone needs a Lainey.
Yeah, seriously. Is there anything that I haven't asked you or that we haven't discussed that you want to mention?
We covered it, but I want to further emphasize, do not take social media literal or as gospel. Just be kind, because you have no idea, whether you're in like a CVS parking lot or like whatever, and like someone cuts you off or whatever. Maybe they weren't paying attention because they were listening to a song that reminded them of someone who passed away a day ago. I had that experience right when my mom passed away, and someone honked at me and whatever. Like, and then I was pissed that someone honked at me, and I was like, "Fuck you! Like, leave me alone." Just be kind. You have no idea. And social media makes us feel like we do have an idea, but you have no idea.
Yeah. It's funny. I don't know why this is, but for as long as I can remember, you know, if someone ever like cut my parents off and they would yell, like my dad would be like asshole, like whatever. I'm like, maybe they're having a really bad day. Maybe they're rushing to a hospital. Like
I
maybe
always
like
think
we have
maybe they're
no
rushing to the
idea.
hospital. Yeah. Maybe their
Like,
wife is giving birth in the back seat.
yeah. And even like I remember I've done this so many times where I'll just like stare out at like all the buildings in front of me in like the skyline. I'm like, I wonder how many people in these windows that I can see right now are like crying and are not okay, or like having the best day ever or the worst day ever. And it's just like, we have no idea what people are dealing with. And the only thing that we can do is be kind.
Be kind. And I'm going to add on to that, be transparent to
Yeah.
whatever, whether it's individually to a friend or on a platform. Because that's the only way to like really further that message, you know?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here. Usually I would end by asking the best piece of dating advice. We've already gotten that from you.
Mm-hmm.
So instead, I know you're obviously still going through it and have a long road forward, but from what you've learned and from what you've experienced, what advice would you give to anyone who is grieving the loss of a loved one?
You're going to surprise yourself. You could, I have a long history of depression with really dark thoughts way prior to my mom's first diagnosis. I would have never thought, and this is before Scott or anything relationship oriented, this is my own inner work. I would have never, ever, ever thought that I'd be able to muscle through this each day in whatever capacity a given day looked like. And I know saying, if I can do it, you can do it, sounds ridiculous because I have a license as a therapist, and this is why I'm going to start posting more transparently, because I'm a human and I don't want to keep posting just inspirational quotes. I want to post real hard things. And my close friends and family and anyone who knew the full picture, not just social media, would back that. They've all been surprised by how I've handled this. And I don't take offense. I'm proud of it because I worked on myself. But you can do it.
Yeah. And I'm proud of you. And I am so appreciative of you reaching out and wanting to come and have this conversation. I think it's hands down one of the most important conversations that I've had on the show. And I just really, really appreciate it. Not to tie this back to career accolades, but where can people find you? And is your practice currently accepting new clients?
Sure are, particularly because I'm not, given what we just talked about. I've I think 5 therapists working with me now, 3 who are very much accepting new clients, and they're wonderful. One focuses on body image, one's more dating and anxiety and career space. They all have their niches, but you can see their bios on my website, which is hlwtherapy.com, or my Instagram, which is at hlwtherapy. And I include lists, ways to find them, and they are wonderful.
Amazing. And yeah, everyone follow Hilary, because we know there's going to be some real content coming, and we can remove some of the toxic positivity from our news feeds by having it taken up by Hilary's content.
I'm going to make a disclaimer. Please only like or comment on these negative, transparent posts if you've listened to this episode.
Yeah. Well, thank you again. And to everyone who listened, thank you so, so much for listening. Please send this to a friend who would benefit from hearing it. Share it on your story. You never know who might see it, who doesn't yet listen to the podcast, who it's exactly what they need to hear. And don't forget to give a 5-star rating and review if you have not yet. And if you guys ever want to come on the show and talk about something, you can always email me, seeingotherpeoplepodcast@gmail.com. Love you guys, and I will talk to you next time.